Hi, friends. Welcome to Coffee Break. This is Dr. Michelle Alignay. I am coming to you live in YouTube, but of course, we're going to upload it in my Facebook page. And I hope that you'll join me for the rest of the afternoon to talk about the rest of the 30 minutes to talk about moving on from loss. This is something that many of us are going through. Alam natin yan na ito yung isang bagay na, oh, ang dami natin na ito yung pinagdadaanan. Ang dami natin na wala and alam ko na marami sa inyo na nakaka-relate with what I'm saying. So, let me just uh, let me just share this to let me just share. Okay, let me just share to my Facebook newsfeed. Okay. Okay, but this will not stop us. This will not, because I know that many people will be blessed. Many people will be, we will be sharing it with many people. So join me for the rest of the afternoon. I know I'm got dissuaded a bit, but this will not stop us. This will not stop us from doing what we need to do. And if you are joining me in Facebook, you can go over this link in YouTube and show me your comments. Show you can interact with me there to be able to talk about grieving, loss, and whatever pain we are encountering now. So, friends, as I said, this is a topic that I know many of us can relate with. This is a topic na marami sa atin ito yung pinagdadaanan. Marami sa atin, this is a need for many of us, honestly. Because we lost a lot. Ang daming nawala sa atin. Kahit na sabihin natin na it's just work, it's just maybe some people that we love, or maybe even the space that we are so used to having. Isn't it that we lost many things? Isn't it na nag-iba? Nag-iba yung mga bagay, nag-iba yung buhay, nag-iba yung ikot ng mga galaw natin. Um, you have to remember, you have to remember that it's really the pandemic time, and it's the thing with loss now, it has become so different on the way we know how to grieve before. Kung paano tayo nag-grieve dati, kung paano tayo um, nagkakaroon ng paraan to be able to cope better after a loss, it has become different. And to say that we lost a lot in this pandemic, it's actually an understatement. I know that you would agree with me. It's an understatement na sabihin na, ay, we lost so much. My gosh, this is an understatement, friends. Why? Because we see that really it cost us so much. So one thing that we lost, wala akong matatanong dito because I know that maybe you're watching me from YouTube and you can head over to YouTube. You can head over to YouTube to be able to access this, or you can just watch through the link that I posted in the Facebook in my Facebook page. I would like you to look into that area that work our work and resources has become different also. Nagbago rin yung kalakaran natin. Nag-work from home yung marami. For the mommies, alam ko na nawala yung space and time nyo to be by yourself. And yun yung mga, and also the freedom of the kids to run when they want to go out when they long to. Even us, even the simple family time that we have before, nagbago, di ba? And pay, even the plans and the dreams, alam nyo, sorry, isa to sa pinakamalaki na narinig ko that they lost a lot of their dreams. They have built plans, but then it has become different. It has become so different. Hindi nila makuha yung mga pangarap nila because simply they just need to do things differently. Because simply you just have to park a plan, a dream, a grand desire that you're having. And I think one of the things that we lost also is the boundaries between work and home, our work life. So please, friends, if you can relate with what I'm saying, I think you can comment You can comment via YouTube, or you can comment via Facebook if you're watching it from Facebook already. But please, I would like you to capture the loss that you have. One thing that will we need to do together as a community, as a family, as individuals who would like to grow. And here in Coffee Break, you know how I like to direct topic. You know how I like sharing things directly, face to face, heart to heart ang usap natin. And one thing that we need to do is really, we can only recover from our loss if we acknowledge the feeling of grief, the sense of grief, undergo that we are undergoing grief. Kasi feeling natin yung pag-grief, parang it's death, diba? So it's so hard to talk about. And I know in one way or another, each of us have experienced death in our lives, have experienced grief. And how are we going to cope through it? One thing that is that one thing that we lost, but then we have to grieve appropriately. Can you say that with me? We have to learn how to grieve appropriately. Uulitin ko yun. We have to learn to grieve appropriately. Ayan, I still cannot access FB. Thank you. Thank you, Car, and thank you, Jing, for commenting on YouTube. Now, may kausap na ako. Sigurado ako may kausap ako. Thank you, Car, and thank you, Jing. Yes, I think, Jing, you're saying we miss being with people, and that is the grief also. We cannot hug and laugh the way we used to for half day, Jing, whenever we would meet and talk about work for maybe 30 minutes, and the next three and a half to 4 hours we're just gonna laugh about life and just connect with each other. But then we should not allow the pandemic to take hold of us, because we, if you see, on one way or another, we have experienced grief. Naramdaman natin yan. Pero hindi lang nga yung way ng pag-cope natin, it's the same. At doon tayo, parang it's like double jeopardy. Yung nahihirapan tayo to navigate, because that's not how we usually manage things. That's not how we grieve. Okay. And the biggest thing that we lost, honestly, is our ability to grieve appropriately. Yan yung, we lost that ability to grieve. Yung, if somebody dies, we go to a funeral, and there's a lot of ceremony that, make us connect with our inner sense to be able to know na, hey, there's closure. I think yan yung maraming nawala. Walang closure because everything is ambivalent. Everything is there. I think that's the perfect word for many of us. There's also ambivalence. Ambivalence in our governance, ambivalence with even our state. Okay, nag-ECQ, nag-MECQ, and then what? Jing, that's true. Parang walang katapusan. Natutuwa ako, meron akong dalawang titang kausap, Jing and Car. It's nice to be talking to you. But how do we recover from loss? Personally, death is not new to me. I lost my son 17 years ago, and it was fetal death in utero. So I lost my firstborn when he was 6 months, and it was so traumatic for a 20. I think I was 27 when that happened, but it was so traumatic for me. And then I lost my dad. I lost my dad about 10 years ago, and that's a different level. But then when that happened, I know I can go out. When Miguel, my first son, I will just analyze it and contrast it to what's happening now. When I experienced that loss, I know I can go out. I can go out when I want to. I can stay at home and cry when I need to. And we can connect. I can connect. There were days that I would go to my mom, and then just, or if my mom is not there, my Lola still alive then, and then I would just hang out with my Lola, and that will be okay. And then there was a point also that I need to to go over to connect with people, to connect with friends, because I just need to connect, because the grief is too much for me. And then we do rituals. And what are the rituals? Of course, there's prayer. I think meron tayong mga novena. Yan ang ginagawa natin to be able to help us, to be able to navigate this grief. And then we keep ourselves busy. And then I remember when I lost my son, I just resigned from my full-time work as a guidance counselor because I want to be a full-time mom. And then lo and behold, my I lost my son on the day after I just spent my last working day at work. I tendered my resignation. It's already my last day. And then that's boom. There's no more life in the baby in my womb. So no more, nothing more to take care of. And my good mentor, my good mentor in the graduate school, when I was taking my MA, said it's not good for you to be alone all the time and to just do nothing. You need to work. And then I did because I need to keep myself busy. Otherwise, I think that was the lowest point. Until now, that has been the lowest point of my life. And that is my and that is grief for me. And then why do I want you to reflect about it? Because it's different now. Because grief, we see that grief, that's an intense psychological, it's also a physiological, and also an emotional experience. So parang yung buo nating pagkatao. And why is it physiological? Others could not sleep, their sleep patterns are disrupted, others cannot eat well, others there's other ailments that is they don't you have it before, or when they're stressed it triggers, but it happens. And this is because there's grief. And why am I saying this? Because grief is actually affecting the physiological, the psychological, and the emotional. The more it's very emotional, it that's why loss, when we talk of loss, it's very necessary that to recognize that we are adjusting to something. May nawala. For example, have you ever lost a tooth or a teeth? 2 years ago, I had my wisdom tooth extraction dito sa left side na upper and lower. And then I have to get used of feeling of not having the the last molars in my gums because I'm used to having it for the longest time, because after that few hours of extraction, it's gone. And I have to transition to getting used to the feeling of losing it. And that is what is we call loss. It's a transition. May nawala. Either bigla, either we are prepared for that, and then it's actually loss. And comes with loss and transition is actually change. We are adjusting to what is it that we have lost. That's why if you reflect, some people, they don't want to accept that they have lost a lot, that their lives change in the pandemic. Until now they don't want to transition in this new normal. They don't want to to experience a life in the new normal, because for them, eh, I'll just wait for the not the normal or the old normal to come. But honestly, if we help ourselves now to transition to this new normal, and to later on to the newer normal that we might have post pandemic, and we're going to pray it's going to be soon. We don't know when, but we hope that it's going to be soon. We'll see that these changes, little by little, has prepared us already. The more that it's going to be difficult, friends in coffee break, I always share this with you. It's going to be more difficult if it's going to be abrupt. If we're going to apply the same patterns pre-loss, bago tayo mawalan, to the patterns that we have now in the existing grieving stage and to the new normal, hindi yan pwedeng no one size fits all. It cannot be that way. Jing, you're saying that it's so sad that there are people who still think they could go back to where we were before. Yes, para bang ano, it's just like a game that you paused. Diba? I think you remember those games. So we will pause and then we can just go back to it and resume, and as if nothing happened. No, I would be bluntly, I will be blunt in saying to you that it's not going to be the same. because grief is normal. Grief has to be experienced. We all need to grieve. We can grieve for a change in the family. We can grieve for your kid stepping out of the house because they need to move out. You can grieve for the loss of a pet. You can even grieve for namatay nating halaman, and then that's part of life because it's normal whether we want it or we don't want it. We need to grieve. So how does grief helps? That feeling and the sense of grieving. I'm not an expert on grief, but I understand all these intricacies somehow. Um, being in this line of work, but how grief helps? Remember that grief helps us in a very personal level. Maraming tao, the more that they push aside grief, they don't acknowledge the loss that they experience, the longer that they will drag themselves, and before they know it, they are sick. Before they know it, they go through depression. Before they know it, they run into other issues compounding on there's a grief somewhere there that is not addressed. It's something that we need to look into. Grieving helps us process loss. Okay, nawala sa akin, iiyak ko to. I will bawl like a baby. I remember there were days when I would just be left by myself when I lost Miguel. And then there were days that ako lang yung tao sa bahay. My husband would go to work. I'm still on maternity leave, and he would leave me here, and then almost the whole day all will I do is cry, and then that's not good, but it's a process that needs to go through. um Movement in transition is necessary when we grieve. Another one, grief helps us because it integrates all our experiences: the experience of pain, the experience of laughter, the experience of support from people around us. And even, have you experienced grieving to the point that there's tears, there's sipon, there's all of you, and then there's pawis, and then you just would like to release everything. I know I've been there in the dirtiest, the murkiest sense of grief, and it's something that we need to experience because it's transitioning us. It's releasing the pain. It's naming the anguish that we're feeling, and all that incomparable sense of loss that we have. I know malalim tong sinasabi ko, friends, but you have to catch it. You have to catch it because it's not easy. It's not easy to grieve. It can be it's understatement to say that grief can be very painful. Grief can be very painful. At alam niyo ba yung mas masakit? Mas masakit kung ayaw natin mag-grieve. Some people, I recognize that some people would like to show the world that they're strong. Some people don't like to show their kids, other kids, or other family members na kailangan ko maging matatag para sa pamilya ko. Not grieving is not equivalent to being strong. Because even if a person is grieving, actually that's where the strength is happening and where the strength is being pulled. So you have to remember that hindi porke hindi ka umiiyak, hindi ka na strong. We have varied ways of expressing grief. And look into it. Our psyche, yung buo nating pagkatao, actually needs to experience grief. The whole of us needs to experience that grief in order for us to adjust. I remember this quote from an old quote from, I think it's Louis Hayes. She said that what we don't feel, we cannot heal. Totoo yan, friends. Kung ano yung hindi natin hini-heal, we cannot feel it. Hindi natin kayang ramdamin, hindi na natin mahihil. So it's important for us to see, hey, how am I grieving? Nag-grieve na ba ako? Iniyak mo na ba? Iniyakan mo na ba? Naramdaman na ba yan ng buo mong pagkatao, yung hanggang kaluluwa mo? Di ba yung sabi nila, tagos bungo, tagos laman, tagos hanggang kaluluwa yung sakit. And that's exactly why it's a very personal psychological process, because some people grieve in the mind level, some people grieve in the heart level, puro emosyon lang, but some people also grieve in the totality of their being. But the funny thing is, we tend to compare, oh, Eh dati naman ang bilis ko naka-recover. Dati naman ito nangyari sa akin, hindi naman ako masyadong naapektuhan. Friends, earlier, I was listening to the podcast of Dr. Brene Brown and David Kessler on the finding meaning behind our grief. And what I realized is that, sure, totoo yun, totoo yun. We need to find meaning behind our grief because even yung loss of a loved one, because of a breakup, your kids moving out, and this pandemic, it's actually lost of a lot of things, loss of going out, simply said that. But for me, nakita ko the pandemic, it's actually our filter. It's a personal filter of what truly matters. And you know what's the meaning of my grief experience before when I was younger? It's for me to become a more decisive and conscious parent, more intentional, more in the know, more mature. It readied me for that stage that I will be a parent and I would be a parent educator like what I'm doing now. If I think maybe if I did not experience the loss of Miguel, I would not be the same person that I am now. And finding meaning in grief, meaning provides for us, as said by Dr. Kessler, don't compare your loss to someone else's loss, or don't compare your loss now to your loss before. Oh, before when I lost my dad naman, I'm not like this, because you are a different person then. And oh, maybe when I lost before like this happened, but then it did not affected me so much because maybe each loss has a different meaning. Each loss has a different spectrum of pain. Each loss has a different dynamic and impact in our system. You're agreeing with me? Uh, we have to remember that we need to find meaning in the grief in order for us to provide it and look at it as a cushion. uh, Look at it as a caution na parang, okay, yung kutsyon, hindi niya tatakpan yung pain, but somehow, pag inalog mo, you know, we have deliveries that there's bubble wrap, right? So, pwede kang mabasag, pero hindi ka niya, you will not be totally crushed because in the grief, in the pain, there is meaning that we put, there is something that we put together. There is an integration of all our parts, and that is the meaning. There is an integration of our head, there is an integration of our hearts, there is integration of the label that we put there. But honestly, meaning making happens after we move on from grief. Kung naka-move on na tayo, pwede rin naman for me, pwede rin na, okay, now that I am experiencing grief, I am finding the meaning. We are looking forward and there's a tone of hope already. Anong meron sa grief na to? Anong itinuturo nito sa akin? Because sometimes we get to blame, Lord, bakit sa akin to nangyari? Okay, it's not wrong to question the Lord on why some situations and some losses happen to us, but maybe we need to move out from that and move on to that sense that I will grieve now, but later on, let's go back together, Lord, and finding the meaning behind all this. Diba ang ganda? And then finding meaning is actually an inward process. The meaning of the pandemic for me may be different for you because iba-iba tayo ng sitwasyon. The meaning of a loss of a mother, the loss of a son, the loss of a sister, and whatever loss that we're having, loss of work, loss of personal resources, we cannot find meaning of these losses if we keep looking at loss outside. Pag hinanap natin sa labas, wala yung meaning. Ang tawag dyan, baka mema lang, may masabi lang, may ma-meaning lang. But I believe, and as David Kessler said, we cannot find it if we keep looking at our loss. We can only find meaning if we look at our lives and we look at the life after the loss. Diba? And then that's something beautiful. And if you look at it, actually, that meaning making has become the fifth stage of the sixth stage of grief. The popular Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was the one who started and put together the model of grief, and then you know the model of grief, right? The stages of grief. But actually, this is not a stage that you go through na parang hagdan. It's an people experience grief in varied ways. So it's good for us who are supporting people who are experiencing grief, and tayo mismo who are supporting ourselves as we go through our own grief. We need to look at it that there are aspects or there are dimensions of grief, or Kubler-Ross called it stages of grief. But we need to look at it in a messy way. In the terms of David Kessler, it's very messy. Mukha siyang, in my terms, mukha siyang halo-halo. Mukha siya minsan na, minsan may ganito, minsan wala. And the popular term for that is dabda. There's denial, D. There's anger, A. There's bargaining, B. There is depression, D. And there is acceptance, A. Dabda. So, those are the probable stages. But it doesn't mean that if you will be on denial now, tomorrow or next week, you will be on anger. And then the following week or two or a month, you'll be in bargaining. No, it can be that it's happening all together. As they said, it's messy. It's there's denial, and then it can be hindi mo na nga dinideny, you're bargaining pa, and then there's anger, a lot of it coming out. Sometimes people do not then deny, but their angers are coming out, and then sometimes depression is already happening, but before they know it, there's loss, there's grief already, but there's denial, and then there's bargaining. But fully, we can also say that I have accepted it already, but I'm still angry, right? So it's not really the stage that progress us from one stage to another, and then after 6 months, okay na ako. No, there's no prescription. Honestly, uh, the experts on grief will say there's no prescription for grief on when you will recover. Actually, it even have effects, lifelong effects. Ako minsan, I really know that there's lifelong effects kasi minsan, pag pain of a mother losing a son, especially pain of an infant baby, sumasakit yung tiyan ko. I have this tugging feeling in my stomach, and I realized that maybe because the only connection that I have with my son now, there's a different feeling that I'm experiencing, is that I am experiencing it because our connection before is our umbilical cords and our heartbeats. So dun ko lang siya mararamdaman. So every time that I have a thought of Miguel who will turn 17 this April, it gives me that feeling of tug, because you know it's a grief that I have overcome, but it's a grief in itself. It's a loss in itself, and it's forever etched in my heart as a mother. And if you look at it, as I said, this is not linear, and grief can also compound with other issues. Kaya pala to nagkahiwalay, kasi kaya sila naghiwalay, hindi niya makaya yung grief niya. So pwedeng lalong it can aggravate some issues, or it can make a person fall into another cycle of depression, another cycle of mental health concern, and even, sad to say, sickness. It can be whirlwind. Sometimes we're okay, sometimes we're not. So we cannot use Dr. Kubler-Ross stages to be able to say na I'm gonna be okay soon kasi nandito na ako. It's not gonna be like that, because it's actually just about putting a name and a label to what we're experiencing, and so we can help ourselves in the process. Para tulungan natin sarili natin, pangalanan natin. And that is something, if we name it, we can start healing it. If we name it, if we feel the denial, if you feel the anger, if you feel that we're bargaining and negotiating, if you feel that pain of depression, of loss, and we feel that, hey, I want to move towards acceptance, and then we can start the healing process. But mind you, it's not going to be easy. Friends, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. The moment that we admit to ourselves that I am grieving, that's a big start already. But many of us, last year I had my own episodes of grief, grief from failed dreams, frustrating circumstances, and maybe I have to admit to myself also, na, hey, I am grieving also because of this. Hey, this is not okay because of this. And why do we need to do that? Because we need to feel so we can heal. Those of you who are watching, those of you who are replaying this, you can say that with me. What we can feel, we can heal. We have to admit our loss so we can experience the grief in order for us to heal. Maybe not fully, but we hope that that pain, that sorrow, that loss, that grief can help us to be whole. Because being whole and recovering it's a personal choice. It's not gonna happen automatically. It's a personal choice. And on Thursday, I hope that I can go live again in Facebook on Thursday. I'm going to continue this discussion regarding grief, moving on from loss, and I'm going to talk about little steps that we can do to be able to support ourselves from grief and loss. Friends, we have to admit that we are losing a lot. We have to admit what we lost. Sulat nyo sa papel so that we can pray for the loss that we're experiencing. I am grieving for the loss of my connection to Facebook. Talagang hindi ako makakonect in any other way using StreamYard. But then the show must go on and I'm here in YouTube. But I hope that you can still share this message of hope. And friends, if you can go over the videos in Facebook, you can support me by sending stars in Facebook. It's you can support this content, you can support this mission that I do by sending Facebook stars via Facebook in the videos that I posted there by clicking my Facebook page. And more importantly, I am inviting everyone to a workshop that I'll be conducting. It's called self-care and beyond. In this process of grief, this process of loss, we need extra ways to be able to support our well-being. And what can self-care do, little or big self-care can do for us? I'm going to discuss that on May 1 in a private webinar. Get the access in my Facebook event. So what's my Facebook page? That's www.facebook.com/ Michelle Alignay. And I hope that we'll continue the discussion on moving on from loss on Thursday here at Coffee Break with Dr. Michelle. And if you have questions, feel free to comment in the comment section and send your questions to me, and we will try to answer them on Thursday. Thank you, friends, and I hope to see you again. Don't forget to send stars if you can. Don't forget to register to my workshop, Self Care and Beyond. And lastly, don't forget to share this to people who might be denying grief, might be needing support, and might need to know that they need to grieve in order to recover loss. What we cannot feel, we cannot heal. God bless everyone. See you again.